Dr. Rimmer, in your work at the Lutheran World Federation, you were involved in the writing and editing of a new document called Now There Are Varieties, which talks about some of those many different churches that are found throughout the world. What are some of the differences that you found in your work with the great span of churches in the LWF? And what are the gifts of that, and what are the challenges of those very different churches? How did that contribute to the writing of this document, and what did you hope to accomplish through it?
Yeah, absolutely. From one of the reasons for the communion to be together, as stated, is to do this kind of theological work together, just to ask these big questions. And it's interesting to follow these study processes across the history of the LWF because they reflect sort of what's going on in public discourse around us and the world. And like I was mentioning, the LWF was founded on these questions of Lutheran identity, and it's sort of in our geopolitical reality today that these questions are coming back around, where identity, the question of identity and identities is being so kind of contested. The differences that we find around the global communion, I think, it's so rich and diverse. And of course, we can begin with the differences in language. There are four official languages: Spanish, French, German, and English, and then that's being expanded into Portuguese and Swahili and local languages found in all the regions. But in a deeper way, a lot of those differences that we see are in the way that we express the Lutheran tradition with a capital T, or the Christian tradition, in local traditions, lowercase t and plural. And some of that, of course, is our liturgical differences, different ways of worshiping, different ways of teaching and engaging in life together as congregations. But there are also these, once you scratch the surface, there are these sort of profound differences in philosophical questions and political context, huge differences between majority Lutheran churches that are in majority context, like the Nordics, where Lutherans are a majority in Sweden and Denmark, and minority context, such as West Africa, where Lutherans are, minorities in a Muslim context. To see the way that brings out differences in the way the Lutheran tradition is expressed really helps us, for example, in the United States, ask critical questions about why do we say what we say, and why do we say what we do, and what is the context that we're responding to. That does create challenges in experiencing communion. And in the Lutheran World Federation, we like to say that communion is a gift, but also a task. We are autonomous churches together, but we're also accountable to each other as churches. And a lot of the challenges, just to say it frankly, are not questions of sort of theological unity or confessional identity, but they're really more along the lines of ethical questions that pull at the ties of communion. So what does this mean? How do we live this out? This radical gospel of liberation is expressed in life through different cultures and political realities. And so questions of gender, questions of, the ordination of women is still a topic in some churches around the Lutheran World Federation. And one example of that is even the engagement on questions of human rights. We all agree that the image of God in every person and in all of creation is the foundation of dignity. But how we talk about that, in the American context, for example, Lutherans might not realize how ingrained we are with conversations about rights. We begin with a rights-based approach to many of these conversations. Whereas in the global South and the global East, the emphasis is not on individual rights, but on social responsibility. And that just gives a different approach to these conversations. And that's really the reason that we started this particular theological process, because we wanted to ask, in some senses, what is Lutheran identity is a perennial question that's always been with us. What does it mean to be Lutheran? But we wanted to ask, in sort of a post-colonial age, really, what are the identities, plural? So if we just asked, what does it mean to be Lutheran? We know what we would get back. People would talk about word and sacrament, and people would talk about justification by grace through faith. But we wanted to do a more sort of inductive study to ask, what does that mean where you live, and how do you live that out culturally? And so we took this approach. Now There Are Varieties was the title from Paul's letter about the varieties of spiritual gifts. And so while we share that one gift of the Spirit that unites us in this proclamation of the gospel, that's going to naturally bear different fruits, because we're different bodies living in different cultures around the world. And I think that is what was fascinating, to see that unity expressed in a diversity of ways.